All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Women's History Month. Welcome to the second annual Safe Communities Institute and Women in Homeland Security, Southern California's Women Leading the Way Empowerment Panel. We have an incredible and powerful lineup today, but before we jump into that, my name is Jessie Redd. I am the interim director at the Safe Communities Institute here at USC. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Safe Communities Institute, we are housed in the Sol Price School of Public Policy and engage in research, interdisciplinary education, and collaboration to advance sustainable public safety strategies, policies, and programs. If you are a public safety professional and interested in leadership trainings at USC, please visit our website at sci.usc.edu. So now I would like to introduce to you the lovely president of the Women in Homeland Security SoCal, Ms. Larissa Chiari-Keith.
Good afternoon. We'd like to begin today with a promotion from our sponsor. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Community Outreach Promoting Emergency Preparedness and Be More Prepared, a nonprofit volunteer emergency preparedness organization. Be More Prepared to Cope for Emergency Survival Preparedness. COPE provides disaster donation management service by working with non-government community stakeholder sectors to obtain in-kind donation of supplies, equipment, and services to provide critical emergency preparedness support services. For more information and to partner with them, please visit their website at atasteofpreparedness.com. All right, thank you once again to our sponsors, Community Outreach Promoting Emergency Preparedness. You can visit their website at tasteofpreparedness.com for more information. Once again, welcome to the second annual Women Leading the Way Empowerment Panel. A little housekeeping items. All lines are muted until the end of the speaker presentation. Use the raise hand feature if you cannot hear us or have any technical difficulties, and we welcome using the chat box to share questions that will be answered during the session. So thank you to Jessie Redd, the interim director of Safe Communities Institute, for welcoming us again and making this an annual event. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of Women in Homeland Security, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event. If you have joined us for our storytelling series with Gabby Allman of Brain and Bullish, you learned how storytelling can be applied in the workplace. Our stories form a connection with others. They guide us, they help us navigate unfamiliar terrain. We're honored to share with you our panel of esteemed experts as they share with us their stories. We will hear about how they discovered their areas of discipline, how they navigated their workplaces, where they may have been the only person in the room who looked like them, and how women helped them along their career path. When I first discovered Women in Homeland Security, Southern California, I was thrilled to find an organization where I could explore all of the different pathways to Homeland Security while meeting women who looked like me. Representation matters. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Women in Homeland Security, Southern California. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to providing a platform in our industry to build relationships, grow in expertise, and contribute to philanthropic causes. Formed in 2017, and this is our 5th anniversary, our network reaches over 600 women and men, and our members represent a broad spectrum, including law enforcement, fire services, public health, emergency management, homeland security, crisis management, cybersecurity, counterterrorism, and disaster preparedness and response. Our goal is to help make the journey as a woman in our field of homeland security, emergency management, and public safety a positive one. We foster a collaborative environment for industry professionals to learn about the discipline and build connections to better understand their roles of public and private sector practitioners in the prevention, protection, and response to any type of incident. We're proud to be the first of our type on the West Coast of our organization focused on homeland security, community, and improving our nation's security and intelligence on critical issues. The 3 main pillars that form the foundation of WHS SoCal is that we network, we learn, and we give back. And one of our upcoming events where we network and we learn and we give back is our Women in Homeland Security Southern California annual award ceremony, August 5th, where we will have a special guest to be announced very soon. And there is always opportunities to volunteer. We can volunteer in the committees of membership, mentorship, programs, public affairs, sponsorship, philanthropy, and advocacy. So I welcome you to contact us at admin@whssocal.org. It is my true pleasure to introduce you to Dr. LaVonna Lewis, Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at USC Price School of Public Policy, who will be our esteemed moderator today. And joining her are our panelists, Desirée Cormier Smith, Senior Advisor, U.S. Department of State, Holli Draines, CEO and founder of Elite Strategy Global, Honorable Danette Gómez, Judge of Superior Court, County of Los Angeles, and Kiesha Nix, Vice President, Charitable Affairs and Lakers Youth Foundation. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much for those opening remarks and for setting the stage for our conversation this afternoon. So as I said, I'm the moderator, and so my job is to be moderate in my presentation and let everyone hear from this amazing panel. And so I'm going to start with the question around what I call the elephant in the room. And here's the question. As women in leadership, what has been the most significant barrier in your career, and how are you handling it, or how have you handled it? And so I'm not going to call on folks because I think that would be dangerous. So if I get a volunteer to speak first, and then at least for the first round, and then I may be more intrusive in terms of calling on folks. So please, first volunteer.
Okay, well, I'll dive right in. So, hello, everyone. I would say one of the biggest and most significant barriers faced in my career is essentially just being judged by what I look like, and not my competencies or my experiences. I think that is something that has been throughout, but it's not something that I shrink to, but it's something that I just continue to break through those obstacles. And I definitely want to hear from the other ladies to see whether or not, they would agree with me and what their thoughts are. But I would say that was probably one of the most significant barriers, is people that just want to look at me and have incorrect assumptions about my capabilities.
Thank you, Holli. Who wants to go next?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll chime in on that. And Holli, I totally agree with you. And I would say exactly what you said. And also, for me, being underestimated, having people, read or hear that, I am a Black woman from South Central Los Angeles, single mom, and then deciding at that moment that I can't be articulate, I can't be intelligent, I can't know anything, about my industry, whether that was finance before or sports now, and just really, having to overcome all of those, stereotypes. It is challenging. It's something that I think, we all face. And I look myself in the mirror every morning and say, you got this, because it's going to be challenging. And I think the way to overcome that for me has been letting my work speak for itself.
That's right.
And just showing them, as opposed to telling them. I just have to show them. I can't fight every war on Twitter. I can't, combat every social post. I just have to let what I do speak for who I really am.
Absolutely.
And I'll chime in next, if I may. I have to say, I echo exactly what both of you have said. I think that I'm often judged also by the way I look. Constantly underestimated. Before I was appointed by the governor as a judge, I was a prosecutor for almost 12 years. And so I think there's also this perception that as a woman and as a prosecutor, you have to be tough and you can't show any mercy. You can't show any sense of humanity. And I always combated that because I thought I want to still be feminine. I want to balance my femininity with intelligence, with professionalism. There's no reason why I have to leave that at the door of the courthouse. And so it was always very a careful balance. not to go too much in one direction because I was afraid if I was too feminine, I wouldn't be taken seriously, especially by males in my field. And when I first started, and still in some sense, it is a largely male dominated industry, the law. And even though there's more female judges being appointed, especially by the last two governors that are committed to diversity, it still is an uphill battle. And so I think that even though we work in different fields, the experience is definitely very similar. There's a common thread amongst all of us.
Yeah, and if I could just briefly to weigh in, I agree with everything the other panelists have said and couldn't agree more. And I think like Danette just mentioned, even though we're in different sort of fields, it sounds like we all have that same experience of being judged of how we look, judged based on how we look, the stereotypes based on what we look like and who we are, and then being in predominantly male settings and trying to push back on the temptation of overcompensating, right? Of conforming to those male characteristics instead of bringing what it is that makes us unique into the workplace. And I think that's also true, particularly for women of color, right? Bringing in what it is that make us women, but also not leaving our racial identity at the door is also a challenge. I think another big challenge, in addition to all the ones already cited, is not falling victim to those stereotypes, right? It can be really hard when you enter a room as the only woman and are consistently being overlooked, right? When your counterpart, instead of addressing you, addresses your male counterpart, even though you are the one who is in charge, who is representing, who could be the most senior person in the room. And I think it's especially heightened for those of us who may look younger than what we are, right? And so folks may look at us and see a woman of color who they assume must be younger than what her position says. So they just often overlook you. And I think what Kiesha said is just, making sure your work speaks for itself is so important to overcome all of those stereotypes.
So thank you all for those pearls of wisdom. I want to kind of take the ideas that you presented in terms of, again, the assumptions that are being made, the underestimating and those sorts of things, and kind of ask a follow-up question, if I may, to really kind of talk about, given all of those assumptions and ideas in people's heads about who you are, how do you, in spite of all of that, bring your authentic self to this work? I read recently that 70% of people are willing to say they hide at least one part of who they are at work. And so, again, given those assumptions, I mean, how do you show up fully authentic and kind of, I guess, deal with the consequences, if I may, of that authenticity? So, Desirée, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you, since you got the last word, I'm going to ask you to have the first word this time. So.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. That's a really hard question. And I honestly don't have a really good answer for that, because I think, until the institutions in which we work are fully safe spaces for people to bring their full selves, it is going to be hard for people to feel comfortable and feel safe to bring their full selves to work, right? And so I'll speak from my experience. I'm at the State Department, which has historically been very male, pale, and Yale. None of those things I am, except maybe the Yale part, since I went to Stanford and Harvard, but went there on financial aid. So that's also debatable, right? But, until the institution and the culture of the institution changes to become less of a place where, in order to succeed, you conform to being male, pale, and Yale and those characteristics, to one where everyone is celebrated for their differences and encouraged to bring them full selves to work, we are going to have limitations on how comfortable one can be in bringing their full selves to work. Do I show up as the same Desirée that I show up to, with my family and friends at work? Probably not. Like, do I wear pearls to go hang out with my friends? No. But will I put on some pearls and a blazer to go be at work? Of course. So I think there are limitations. And I think you have to find a place in the space in which you're comfortable with those limitations, right? And I will say that I'm very proud that the State Department of today is a much more welcoming place for people who are not white men, who are not wealthy, who are not heterosexual, than it was even when I started. So I started my career as an FSO, and in my, third tour, I had a supervisor straight up tell me, you need to tone down your personality when you come into work. You need to have a work sort of persona and leave some of that at the door. How does that make you feel, right? As a young Black woman, hearing that from an older Black woman who has been a part of the institution. And unfortunately, I think it's because for so long, the State Department has been a place in which you, in order to be successful, you really do have to conform to the sort of majority culture.
Thank you. What else?
Yeah, I completely agree with Desirée. Before I opened this security and risk management firm, Elite Strategy Global, I work for Secret Service. I have a lifelong career in law enforcement. I was police officer in Hartford, Connecticut, where I grew up, urban city, and then went on after grad school to the Secret Service. And it is a place where it's tough because we're still breaking down barriers. We're doing better, but we still got a ways to go. And so you come in there wanting to be your authentic self, but wondering whether or not, will that be acceptable? And we know that there's so many that have been paving the way for me. How do I continue to pave the way? And how do I make sure that I'm showing up as my authentic self and not setting us back? I would say for me, I also lean very heavily on my faith. I was raised by, and again, faith is a tough conversation because everyone's got a different walk and relationship, but anyone that has read my story or knows anything about it, I went through some excruciating times where faith was my only constant. I was raised by a single mom where she really pushed the power of faith and prayer. And so now that she has, gone on and she has passed away, it's still that faith that continues to help me to show up as my authentic self for me, because there's just so much at you that I need to center in order to show up. And that's the one place where I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know I can lean in on that. And even if the day has been the most amazing, and I've had some awesome days in my career with the Secret Service, I've had some awesome days here owning my own business. And I've also had some really excruciating days. And I think all the ladies on this panel can say there have been days where have been so awful that you're like, getting up and going back in here today is not something I want to do. But for me, it's been my faith that's been like, you know what? You got this. You can go back in, you can continue to push forward. And so that's how I continue to try and show up as my authentic self.
I think that as a judge, I'm very cognizant of the fact that when someone walks through the doors of my courtroom, I don't know if that's the first experience they've ever had with the criminal justice system or with the legal system at all. And so part of my authentic self is I've always been a friendly, warm, kind, and patient person and empathetic. So I want those litigants to know that I respect them. I want to treat them with dignity. Some of my colleagues are more concerned with efficiency and moving people in and out. And that's never been my primary concern. I think that I don't have to compromise that. I can still be a human being and show my humanity and be kind. So I always try to be respectful to anyone that comes in my courtroom. I don't care what you're charged with. I don't care what walk of life you come from. You deserve my respect. And I do this regardless of whether they are disrespectful to me. And that doesn't mean I don't still command respect. And but I think I try to lead and show that I need to be respected by respecting everyone around me, regardless of whether I'm having a good day or a bad day. There's a saying I love, and it's you must be the same in defeat as you are in victory. And I always try to be that way as a prosecutor. And so I try to be that way as a judge. And that doesn't mean that my patience doesn't get tested. And I have litigants and lawyers and law enforcement that comes into my court and they see that I'm a woman. And so sometimes they treat me differently than I know they treat my male counterparts. Sometimes they're patronizing or paternalistic or, disrespectful or push boundaries. And so I always just try to remain who I am and not be triggered by external forces, because I figure if I let that happen, then I'm letting like a wind blow me around, and I'm not being my authentic self. So I just try to be steady in who I am. And I agree with what Desirée says. It's hard to be 100% who you are, because especially as a woman, especially for me as a judge, because I do have to maintain some distance sometimes to get that respect that is so easily given to my male counterparts. But those are the ways I think I try to bring in my authentic self. Thank you.
And I'll wrap up for you, Dr. Lewis. I feel like I'm nodding my head constantly because I love everything that my fellow panelists have said. Like, these women are awesome. And I love that we're all on the same page. It's also sad that we are on the same page because, as Desirée said, we cannot bring our 100% authentic self. Now, I do bring a lot of myself, and sometimes it's too much. I am a lot, and so they can't handle all of it. So I have to give it to them in small doses. And you mentioned the word consequences and repercussions, and there are consequences sometimes for that. I love what Holli said about her faith. Because I am a Christian and I am unapologetic about that. And too often in the workplace, schools, wherever we are taught or asked not to bring religion. But if I need to, call on the Holy Spirit, I need to do that whenever, wherever I am. And so, I have definitely, faced challenges for being authentic. I am a, very outspoken and strong and passionate woman. And that is often mistaken for being the angry Black woman. And so whenever that happens, I definitely stop in my tracks and explain to whoever is saying that I'm not angry. I am passionate. And if I'm talking about the youth in my community, I'm passionate about those youth, just like they belong to me, as if they were my own children. If I'm championing a cause for women, I'm passionate about that. And it's their misconception that I'm angry or that, I'm being overly assertive. But like everyone has said, yes, my coattail has been pulled before, to dial it back, to reel it back. But it's really challenging for me to do that. I don't know how to be anybody other than who I am. I don't think any of us realize that being a tightrope walker would be a part of our resume, but we have to do that every day that we wake up. It's a balancing act. But I tend to lean more on the other side. And I have to say this because it's true and it's honest. I report to two phenomenal women at the Los Angeles Lakers. And one of those women is our owner, Jeannie Buss. And I have been told by her, and Jeannie is a proud alum of USC and a member of the Board of Trustees, to continue to speak my truths, to say what I have to say what's on my mind. It's refreshing, in some circles, not always, accepted. But when you have, people behind you encouraging you to do it, as opposed to reprimanding you for doing it, it does make things a little bit easier. But again, not accepted across the board. And so, unfortunately, this is just one of the plights that we have to face and figure out how to have that even keel, as Danette said, how to balance it on a daily basis.
My mouth was taking a break. So we started this conversation again, and I think the issue of male-dominated workspaces is being presented as the reality, and in some instances, the dominant narrative. And so I want to flip it and basically ask, what are the benefits? What are the assets of being a woman in those spaces? And again, how do you use that to, again, maybe influence the conversation or the dynamics? And so, Kiesha, since you, again, the last person, again, to speak, and you guys have figured out how I'm going to do this. So now you know what's going to happen if you want to avoid that last spot. But to just kind of really think about, again, we take it for granted that maleness is what's valued, but how is femaleness valued in terms of, again, the work that you're doing?
Well, yes, I figured you out, Dr. Lewis. So I was trying to be ready, but I will say, I really liked what Danette said in one of her earlier answers about being feminine. And, I often make a joke about kicking down the glass ceiling while wearing my red bottoms. Again, going back to just, being authentic, we shouldn't have to trade, one for the other. We should be able to come with our pearls on, with our dress or our sweats and sneakers, if that's appropriate. We should be able to do that and still be valued, for what's up here, not what's, out here. And so I have, embraced the fact that, I'm in a male dominated world, and I've made those, men my allies. I have several, male mentors, Caucasian male mentors. They don't look like me, but when I tell you they champion me, they sponsor me, they go out on a limb for me, because I've allowed my work to speak for itself. And I've probably changed some of the minds, of some of them. Now, it's not going to go for everyone, but the ones that I'm able to show them, I can work with them. Their ideas are great. My ideas are great. How can we collaborate together? So I've tried to, build up more of a bridge, as opposed to, look at them as, polar opposite of me. We have a lot more similarities, than we have, differences, if we just sit down and take the time to listen to one another, to be accepting, of other cultures and, other ideas. I try, again, just to be more of a collaborator than just out there, a lone woman championing my own cause, because it just doesn't get you as far. Again, not saying that I'm just going to go along to get along, because that is not me either. And so every decision that I make, I have to be prepared to face the consequences, of those actions.
I can jump in. For me in my field, diplomacy, I think the benefit of being a woman is clear, right? Because half of the world's population is women. And so if you have a diplomatic corps that is comprised of only men, there's a limitation in how effective you're going to be in engaging with the world. And so even though diplomacy in and of itself is a male-dominated field, being a woman in this space is immensely valuable, because you are able to enter into spaces where some men are not allowed. And one practical example of that is in predominantly Muslim countries, where men and women cannot be in the same spaces, may not be able to have conversations in the same rooms about issues of national security, of foreign policy, right? Or even basic community level, right? What's going on in the community? How can we build more resilient communities on issues of education, of food security, of sanitation, where women traditionally are the leaders in the communities on these issues. So having diplomats, having leaders in our foreign policy and national security who are women, who can engage with women in communities and women leaders and women civil society is immensely valuable. And without that, we would be missing out on half of the world's population.
I think I'll hop in, because she put Desirée gave a good lead in, as did Kiesha. I was like, okay, here's a good moment. I think when it comes to acting as an asset, it's our intelligence, it's our contributions daily, it's our experience, it's our intuition, it's our strength. And it's not to say that our male counterparts don't have these things, but seeing them coming from women puts a new face on our industry that people want to, at times, assign it to one gender and one type of being. And so I think for me, again, working for an agency like the United States Secret Service, being on the presidential detail, traveling the world, having to interface with a lot of different entities, not just on behalf of the service, but on behalf of the protectees that we have to protect. Being a woman in that space is a light that a lot of people just don't realize shines as brightly, if not brighter in so many different ways. I can't tell you the number of times I would arrive with the first lady or any of the other female protectees, and we would be going down the rope line, and you would hear someone say, I didn't know that there were women that did what you do, right? And so therein is the validation and the asset, like just the level of pride of these women that could be my mom, my grandmother. They've got their young ones there, and they're used to seeing men, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not bashing them in the least, but the pride to say, oh my goodness, there's someone that looks like you that's doing this, that in and of itself, it opens the door for our young ones, for all women, just trying to figure out what you want to do and be in life, to see someone doing what you want to do, or having a general idea of what that looks like, and seeing someone like, all these distinguished panelists blazing the trail, that's where we are our greatest asset, in my opinion. And now owning my own business, I go into rooms all the time, and I think they are looking around for a male as the head of security and risk management. Where is the male? And so, and my team takes pride in saying, nope, it's right here. The buck stops here. So that's where our asset is, really putting a face on something that, yes, we're used to seeing men, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love my men. We embrace our men, but to be able to see women thrive in this space is a beautiful thing.
And I love what Holli just said, because I have a funny story to share with you all. I will sometimes be outside in my courtroom, talking to my clerk or looking at the calendar, and I won't have my robe on. And so there was a time when these police officers came to get a search warrant reviewed, and they said to me, ma'am, where is your judge? Is he available to sign a search warrant? And where is his chambers? And I said, I'll take you back. And so I take them back, and then I come and sit at the desk, and they just are horrified and embarrassed because they didn't even think that maybe I was the judge. So I can't tell you how many times that's happened. It's happened so often. When I go outside without my robe, and people just assume, you must be, one of the lawyers, or you must be the clerk, but there's no way you're the judge. So I was raised by a single mother, like many of you have mentioned, you were too. And I had sisters. So we were a house full of women. And my mom is a very strong woman. She came from Cuba at a very young age. And so I've always embraced and loved being a woman. And I love being a female judge. I'm so proud of it. I love when I see young women come into my courtroom. I love when I interact with the female lawyers and litigants. And I just like to give that face, like all of you have mentioned, to show them that you can be a woman, and you can get this job, and you can get appointed, and you can have the kind of career that I've been blessed to have, and I've worked hard to have, but it's available to you. And so I just really enjoy being the face of that and showing other women that they can do it too. And I love being able to encourage other women in my field. And I know sometimes women have the unfortunate experience of not having supportive female counterparts or bosses or colleagues. And when I've encountered people like that, I try to kill them with kindness, and I try to show them I'm not that woman. Like, I want you to succeed. If you succeed, I succeed, and vice versa. And there's room for all of us, and I don't have to step on anyone or show anybody up, because we all have an opportunity to shine. So that's how I think the female perspective helps me in my industry.
And Dr. Lewis, I know I've already spoken, answered your question, but Danette's comments just reminded me of one thing. And, I think it's so important to realize that our presence in these spaces, in and of themselves, that itself is revolutionary, right? And it says that there's nothing inherent about being a man that makes you smarter, that makes you better, that makes you more capable than us. Anyone can do it. One of the things that a pillar of our foreign policy is that no one, based on their gender, on their race, on their sexual orientation or gender identity, should be prevented from living up to their full potential. And we are living proof of that, right? Like, we are in these spaces because we are just as smart, just as capable, just as effective as any men. And so that, I think, is another important point, an important, why our presence in these spaces matters, because it does show that there's nothing sort of more special about being a man, right? Like, women can do it just as well as men and can do it in our red bottoms, like Kiesha said.
So thank you, and I appreciate that amendment. It definitely needed to be said. And so I want to honor the folks that have taken the time to be here. And so there are a couple of questions that I want to kind of bring to the group. And so the first one, which is really kind of from a policy school, is very interesting in terms of, do you feel legislation can change the stereotypical perceptions of women in these industries sufficiently? Is changing the law what we need to change the stereotypes?
I'm happy to take a stab at that. That's a tricky question. I think that's why all of us are sort of stunned on how to answer it, is because, laws and legislation are important to deal with the systemic issues, right? To make sure that institutions are not unjustly discriminating against women based on their gender, or against people of color based on their race, right? But in terms of stereotypes, I don't think laws can dispel or prevent stereotypes. That's a whole different issue. Just like racism, right? Like, since the 1965 Civil Rights Act did away with, many aspects of systemic racism in our laws. There's still much more to be done. But did that eradicate racism and prejudice from people's minds and hearts? No. It's still very much prevalent today. So I think, yes, legislation is important to deal with the institutions and to make sure that legally it is not acceptable or possible for someone to be discriminated against based on their identity, based on their sex, their race, their gender, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of dealing with stereotypes and biases, that's something that has to be a cultural shift.
Anyone else want to answer that question, or should I go to the next question from the audience?
I can add to that, if I may. I think that I definitely agree with Desirée. I think that it's much more, it's a much greater issue that probably needs a much more greater solution. And I think that generationally, it needs to continue to unfold and change, and people need to continue to work towards it. As a constitutional officer, I will say that the laws are only as useful as their application. Do we have people in the positions necessary that are carrying out the laws appropriately? People like me included. Is there enough diversity on the bench to make sure that the laws are carried out appropriately, that the judges are using their discretion appropriately, that when we can use our discretion to give someone an opportunity and help with rehabilitation, are we doing that? So I think that that's also another component. The law is only as good as its application, right? So I think that that's part of the problem too, and hopefully part of the solution as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, Judge Gómez, this question was specifically for you. And it's first, thank you for representing the judicial branch in the Homeland Security arena. Second, what advice do you give to Latinas who just entered the judicial branch for the courts to not only be heard, but be successful in their division and overcome the traditional culture of the system?
If I understand the question correctly, it sounds like the person asking the question is asking, what advice would I give other judges, other people entering the judicial branch? I don't know if the question was meant to be broader, such as anyone entering the legal field or the criminal justice arena, but I'll take it from the perspective as a judge. I guess advice that I would give a newly appointed judge or newly elected judge would be to, I always try to make up with preparation whatever I lacked in experience. As a prosecutor and as a judge. So I always worked twice as hard as I probably had to, and tried to be twice as prepared to cover myself for anything that could come up that was out of my control, right? I mean, I think we all try to do that in a sense in our field, and we try to control as much as we can control. But I think it would be also to maintain your authentic self. I think that was a great question we took earlier in a great discussion. You need to be true to who you are. I wasn't going to compromise being a woman. I wasn't going to compromise my beliefs and my values in order to do this job. If I have to do that, then I don't want to do this job. It's not worth it to me. So I think that I would say to a Latina or any woman of color, any woman, period, coming into this field, that you represent something even greater than yourself. And being up on that bench, I see it as an opportunity to show other women that they can do this too. Especially growing up poor in Huntington Park and being raised by a single mom, who didn't speak great English. I grew up with those different challenges, and I have imposter syndrome sometimes too. I think, is that real? Am I really here? Is that really my name on the bench? But I think it's just believing in yourself and working hard. I work hard every day to earn the right to wear that robe, and so that's the advice I would give. Don't act like it's a given. Earn it every single day because you have to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. Kiesha and Holli, this question is for you. And it really is around, what do you say to the young woman who basically wants to be your replacement? Right? I mean, what is it that you would want them to know if they aspire for the seats that you currently have?
I would say, call me immediately. I literally take pride, Dr. Lewis, in saying that I hope that I am grooming, the next Kiesha Nix, the next person to take on this role, someone from the community, someone that understands, what we need. But what practical advice I would give, is to say that, this is not for the faint at heart. This is not just some fun, job. I just did a panel discussion right before this with a PR agency. And one of the questions to me was, do you have to go to every game? Like, isn't that fun? No, it's not fun. It's work. That means, 41 times out of the season, I have to be in arena. And recently I checked my step counter, and at one game, I did a mile before I got there. I did 3 miles in the arena, and I did a mile after the game. That's 5 miles more than I ever want to do. And so it's not just being in entertainment. I mean, you have a responsibility. And so you have to really be mentally and physically ready and prepared. And any number of things are going to be, shot at you that don't fall into your job description. And I'm sure that goes for all the women on the panel. You set out to do one thing and you look up and you're involved in so many other things. And so I just say to them, you have to be open-minded. You have to be ready and prepared mentally, and know that you're going to be challenged because you are a woman in a male-dominated, field. I went to our minor league team basketball game on Saturday, our G League, and I saw 3 female officials. I almost had a heart attack. I have never seen that at any level of sport, whether it was Pop Warner, all the way to professional. 3 female officials. I was taking pictures. I was so excited, as if I was just a fan, because that showed me that we have really come a long way. And they demanded the respect of those male athletes on that court. And I just wanted to run up, after the game, you can't really run up to an official. It's a security breach. And I didn't want to be detained, but I wanted to go and cheer them on, to let them know. So I say that, to all of our young people that are aspiring to be in this position or any of these positions, just know hard work is the great equalizer, and there's no skipping the line. You're going to have to just buckle down and work hard. And some things are a given. Is it fair? No, but it is reality. And so we have to deal with that.
You better say it, Kiesha. Say all of the things. Because now, we can't always be our authentic self, but I feel myself wanting to let my hair down low. I'm just kidding. But no, I'm really not. So, ladies, to complement what Kiesha is saying, yes, these field specifically the one that I come from, and that's the one that I can best speak to. Is it easy? Oh, no, it is not. It is absolutely not. I worked hard. I prepared hard, because you have to do it, in my opinion, you can't just do it just as good. It's almost like you have to do it better. And so I would say, first and foremost, practical advice, no matter what your age range is, and we've had this conversation when we have our interns come in and they don't think that decisions in college matter. They don't think decisions at their young age, well, I'm just doing this or I'm just experimenting doing that. Let me be the first one to tell you, as you're deciding what you want to do, every decision that you make has an impact on your future. And I feel terrible when I've had to have those conversations with young people when they just said, well, I was just doing this and it was just college. And I just didn't mean that, or I didn't mean. And to know that some fields, what you do in your earlier life, in your college, will directly allow you to be afforded an opportunity, or it will quickly cancel you out. And so that's my first advice. Know what you want to, have an idea of what you want to do, and do the research about what it requires. I will say for the Secret Service, I can't speak to everything that's part of that application process, but what I can speak, or even being a CEO of your own security and risk management firm, but how you conduct yourself even before your first day of work directly impacts whether or not you are blessed with that opportunity to serve and protect in that way. That's my one thing. To piggyback on Kiesha, yes, it is mentally and physically taxing. Get your mind right. Surround yourself with the best tribe of people that believe in you and for you, because there are going to be plenty that are not. They're going to say, are you sure you want to do that? Or that's kind of difficult, or I just really don't see. We can just, for every person that I'm sure these ladies can say that probably questioned whether or not we were going to be able to get to where we are, I would probably be a very rich person if I had a quarter for every time that happened. So do yourself a favor early. Surround yourself with a tribe of dynamic and really inspirational women leaders. Get yourself that mentor. Get yourself that person that will speak into your ear, that will hold you accountable, and that will help you to push hard for the dreams that you want to achieve. And my last thing is, be your best and most fierce advocate. What I have learned heading up my own firm is that I cannot ask my team to do anything that I'm not willing to do. And some people say lead from the front and not from the back. I say lead in both directions. Lead from the front so that they know you are willing to go through it before you're asking them to. But there was a woman at my church who recently passed away, and what they said about her is she would lead from the back so that she could see what was going on and make sure she didn't miss anything that her people needed. So just that is my advice to you, is know the kind of person you want to be, know the space that you want to be in, and be your most loyal advocate to propel yourself there, and then surround yourself with the people that will help hold you up on your left and your right.
Thank you both for those responses. I think they were they helped me. I can't speak for anyone else. So thank you. So Desirée, this is for you. I aspire to become a foreign service officer and would like to know how you entered that role, where you began educationally and career-wise.
I was so happy to see that question come up in the chat because the Foreign Service and State Department in particular can be such a mystery to people, and it shouldn't be, right? In order to be effective, the State Department and the people representing our country have to look like America. They have to look like the American people, and we're far, far from that. So I'm always advocating for people to consider a career in the Foreign Service, or if you don't want to live overseas but want to continue to help develop and execute foreign policy, consider the civil service. So people don't realize that the State Department is comprised of both foreign service officers. Those are the folks that live overseas and work in our embassies and consulates, and then civil servants who are primarily based in Washington, D.C. I started my career as a foreign service officer by complete accident. And that's a problem, right? Like, because too many people who aren't male, pale, and Yale don't know about the Foreign Service. I just happened to hear about a fellowship while I was an undergrad from a friend of mine who had just gotten it. And it's called the Pickering Fellowship. So if there are any students on the call or on the webinar, consider the Pickering Fellowship. There's also another called the Rangel Fellowship. These are two fellowships that the State Department has to cater to build a pipeline of diverse Americans to enter the Foreign Service. And they will pay for you to finish school. So in my case, I got a fellowship as an undergraduate. So they paid for me to finish undergraduate school, paid for me to go to graduate school. And that was really the selling point for me. And then I entered the Foreign Service. And the benefit of these fellowships is that they capture people early. People growing up, kids hear about doctors, they hear about lawyers, they know, there's such thing as a police officer, a firefighter, but not many of us, particularly those of us who grow up in places like South Central, like Inglewood, like Huntington Park, right? You may not have heard of a diplomat. So it's so critical that we spread the word and the State Department needs to do a better job of doing, diplomacy here at home so that people know that these careers exist. They're important and they are accessible to any American. One common myth about the Foreign Service is that you have to have some kind of fancy degree to join. That is actually not true. All you need is a high school diploma to take the Foreign Service exam. Exactly. Yeah, that was my reaction too, Kiesha. But I think that's really important because when we have a foreign service, a civil service that looks like America in terms of our racial diversity, gender diversity, sexual orientation and gender identity diversity, people with disabilities, but also people who come from community colleges or maybe who didn't go to college at all, we have a more effective foreign service. So I would highly, highly recommend that you look up careers.state.gov to find pathways to the Foreign Service as well as to civil service positions.
Thank you very much. And so I'm actually going to ask two questions and you can answer either one as kind of as the final one, because they're both good questions that I think are important. And one was, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome and how do you handle it? And can you talk about how you negotiated a salary as a woman of color and as a woman in these male-dominated spaces? Any advice you would give to, again, either of those two questions? And again, I'm going to say now that that those will be the last two that we have a chance to answer. So please.
I'll take the imposter syndrome. I've always been a government employee, so I don't know anything about negotiating a salary. I will say that I suffer from imposter syndrome. I'm getting better at it. I think as I get older, more confident in my position. But I think when I tell people that, they're often surprised because I don't think I portray it or it comes across that way. But I think that a lot of times I feel like, do I really deserve this? Am I really worthy of this? And so I think that propels me to just work harder to try to not only prove to other people, but to prove to myself that I do. But I definitely suffer from it. And I suffered from it as a prosecutor and I do as a judge. And I think it's something that I work on overcoming every single day. In a sense, though, I think it's one of the things that drives me the most. So I think it's negative, but I managed to sort of make it into a positive and use it as a way to encourage and push myself to continue to excel and, be the best version of myself I'm able to be.
Well, I'll take the negotiation question. I do probably have the imposter syndrome too, because sometimes I pinch myself when I'm standing next to all of these amazing athletes and people that I grew up, idolizing. But when it comes to negotiating salary, unlike Danette, I never had a government job. So I grew up in finance and it was about negotiations. We got, salaries, but additional compensation, you had to fight for yourself. And so I learned at a very young age, and I was really not comfortable doing that, as many of us are not today. But I realized, as Holli said, we have to be our own biggest cheerleader. I had to be my lawyer, my negotiator. I had to sit across from a senior partner and call what I wanted. And so I spent 21 years in finance in corporate America. And when I got ready to come transition to the Lakers, one of the questions was, what was my number? So I gave them the number, and they honestly said that was a little more than, what we were expecting. And I said, that's my number. And I bring 21 years of experience, and I'm not backing down. You have to know your value. You have to know your worth, and you have to have a threshold. Now, if there's a number that I'm okay with, but I'm really going for, but you can lie to so many people, but you can't lie to yourself. And so I held my ground on the number. And ladies, when I got the offer, it was bigger than the number that I gave them. So I would have lowballed myself. I would have left money on the table had I folded, at the first sign. So I'm not a great poker player, but I'm just saying.
Well, I think actually Kiesha's advice is relevant to both questions. Knowing your value and knowing what you bring to the table is actually really important when you're negotiating salary, and titles. Titles are really important as well, especially in DC and especially in government world, but also when you find yourself struggling with imposter syndrome, just reminding yourself of your value and what you bring to the table and that you deserve to be there. I too have suffered from imposter syndrome. I refuse to do it now, though. I'm no longer going to give the institutions that power. And whenever I feel unworthy, I ask why. Right? What is it about this scenario that is making me feel an imbalance in power or unworthy when I deserve to be here? And so I like to turn on the institution. There's something wrong with you for making me feel this way. It's nothing wrong with me. I deserve to be here. But you are about to lose me if you continue to make me feel that way. And that shift in the power dynamic has been really helpful for me, also remembering my worth and my value.
And I would say I agree with everything that's been said. When it comes to what has been a intersection for me is between Danette and Kiesha, is I went from government to the private sector. So now all of a sudden you're negotiating yourself. You're like, what is happening here? So, I grew up in the government from, local to federal. Your salary is set, that no negotiation required. If you want the job, this is what it is. So I think to Kiesha's point and to Danette's point, it was definitely a learning curve for me. And I would say what I learned is exactly what has already been said. You have to know your worth. You just have to know your worth, and your insides may be turning, your stomach may be turning. Like I said, we're having honest dialogue with people. So it is not thinking that you are less than, but it is a nervous space, at least for me, because it's unfamiliar. And unfamiliar is not necessarily synonymous with something bad. It's just different. And so what I had to step into is I come with a lot of experience, not just paper on a wall, but time and craft. And so it is okay, to sit up in my seat, adjust my blouse and say, this is what it needs to be. Not in an arrogant way, but in this is what it has to be. So I would say when it comes to negotiating salaries, just, know your worth, know your experience in your craft, and come to the table honestly and authentically and stand by that, and don't let others, diminish that or, diminish your light in that capacity.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you all for being amazing and sharing so much of yourselves and your stories with us today. I'm encouraged, and I'm sure that our audience is as well. Thank you all. And again, I'm going to pass. I think we're done. Again, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.